So once again, good morning, everybody. My name is Trudy, and I started InsightLA exactly 19 years ago. It was around September, October, 19 years ago. And we started with a meditation group. We call them a sitting group. It doesn't matter whether you're lying down or standing up or what you are, but it had 2 people in it when we started. And we started in the office of my friend Susan Kaiser Greenland. We would just go in and sort of move all the office furniture and then set cushions and had some chairs on the floor. And we would do walking meditation in the hallways of this little office building on Berkeley Avenue in Santa Monica, or Berkeley Street, I don't know which it is. And there would be these long corridors where we would do walking meditation together. And there was this one place where you would turn the corner, and behind one of the, it was night, so people weren't in their offices for the most part. But behind one of the office doors it sounded like a gigantic dog that would just bark and growl so fiercely as we walked by. It was kind of our mindfulness bell. And there weren't very many of us. And we grew to get as big as, well, maybe 25 people. And then we had to find a new space when we moved to LMU, where that sitting group, it was Thursday nights. It continues now on Tuesday night with Maureen Shannon Chappell teaching it. And I've just been reflecting on, how anniversaries are. You reflect on where you've been and where you might go from here. So just again, welcome all of you to Sunday morning sitting group. Very grateful to have this time to practice together, to hear some teachings. This morning, I'm going to teach along the same theme of what I taught yesterday for the international group Sangha Live that was started by my colleague, Martin Aylward, who started a meditation center in the south of France, a British guy, and is a wonderful teacher. And I taught really, how do we maintain our sense of love and aliveness even in the midst of suffering? And the title was Life Blooms in the Midst of Suffering. And I prepared way more teachings than we had time during the day yesterday, so I want to share some with you. And I don't know if any of you were there yesterday at that. Oh, good, Ava was there. Laura, so you might hear a few things that you heard before, but I'll offer some new things too. So let's sit together. I'll do some guided meditation today along the lines of self-compassion and metta, loving kindness, metta karuna. So finding the spot where you can be comfortable for the next half hour, where your body can sit or stand or lie down and be still. So beginning right here in your chair or your cushion or your couch or your bed or your floor, wherever you are, breathing in the aliveness of this moment and breathing out any tension in the body. And a deep in-breath, that inspiring breath, the energizing breath. And releasing. And one more time, breathing in and out. And following the out breath all the way to where it just dissolves and vanishes into space. One more time. That long, mindful exhalation can lead us right into the quiet and simplicity of just being here together. One of the spiritual virtues or strengths in Buddhist psychology is called nekama, often translated as renunciation. It's a word that can send sort of shivers down your spine, but it really means simplicity, just letting go of everything extra and simply being here. And I want to invite you to bring attention to the sensations in your heart. Just checking in with how does the whole region of the heart feel? Is there tension there? Relief? Maybe some sadness or anxiety? Just how does that feel? And sometimes feeling the heartbeat, the pulse of the blood flowing in this body. And just taking a moment to see if you can feel your heart. Just sensing and feeling from the inside out. Just noticing the awareness that knows what's happening right now, that senses and feels. And then the content of awareness, the subject, noticing the feelings in the heart, the movement of the breath in the body. And as you come into presence with yourself, just noticing, reminding yourself to be aware there are other people here with you and me on this Zoom. Being present this way together amplifies the awareness, the mindfulness, the ability to notice and know what's happening. And when the attention wanders into the past or future, to memories or plans, just gently moving the body back. like a gesture of awareness, stepping back into the citta, the mind heart, the host of all experience. And all the thoughts and feelings and memories and plans, these are the guests that appear and disappear in the stream of consciousness that we call our citta, our mind heart. Aware that we are in this Zoom room together, in this moment of life together. Each one of us is a person who feels and senses emotions, who sits very still while riding a roller coaster inside, a roller coaster ride of pleasure and pain, of joy and sorrow, of worries and peacefulness. You and I and each one of us have felt happy at times, You and I, each one of us, have been hurt too. Every one of us has felt insecure, inadequate, frightened at times. And each one of us wants to be happy or content with this life. We each want to feel like this life has meaning. And each one of us has had our sense of meaning or fulfillment deeply challenged at times. And every single one of us, no matter our condition, no matter how we identify in this life, how we are seen, how we see others, each one of us has suffered more than we would ever have chosen to. Just sitting with the fact that this being human is not easy. So here we are. There may be a sense of some heartache or just contemplating the poignancy, the bittersweetness of just being here together. Our lives blossoming, blooming in the midst of whatever challenges or suffering may be happening. And each one of us here in this group can take a few minutes to invite. This is a kind of loving practice, loving kindness practice that we've done together, just to invite some of your benefactors, allies, loved ones, figures who inspire you. It could be parents or grandparents who have passed away, or inspiring figures. Maybe a fairy godmother, Mr. Mandela, the Dalai Lama. Your pets, just let them appear in your consciousness and gather around you and beam out their caring for you. Just sensing and feeling their love and compassion in your heart. And connecting with the sensations and feelings in the heart, offering kind intentions, friendly wishes toward everyone else here. toward your loved ones, towards humanity as a whole. And receiving, taking in the kind intentions, the friendly wishes, the love of everyone here. So each time that we connect with our hearts, whether it's a self-compassion exercise, a loving kindness, whatever method, simply being mindful and tuning into the body, whatever method we use to connect with the heart, each time we do that, we're actually um, gathering in our courage, strengthening our presence, and the capacity to care for ourselves and each other. And the doing of this builds resilience. I was studying recently something that, I mean, I just didn't know about it, even though it's been, I guess, um, an American research psychologist named Dr. Paul Stoltz introduced the concept of the adversity quotient to the world in 1997. It was, you know, we understand about emotional intelligence and we understand about IQ. So we have IQ, EQ, the emotional intelligence quotient, and then now we have the adversity quotient. And it's really designed to measure how resilient we can be in the face of suffering. And this is really what we're doing in our practice, and we're doing it in all kinds of ways that we might take for granted, or that you might take for granted. I know I have taken for granted. You know, I'm not using the royal we. I'm speaking to you really from, well, first of all, the unceded lands of the Coast Miwok indigenous people who inhabited these lands way before Europeans got here. But I'm also speaking to you, and you're hearing me from, you know, all the years of learning and practice in so many different ways that you've been doing in this life. For example, just developing the mindfulness that brings the mind and body to the same place at the same time, whether it's being here and talking to you, or whether it's going for a walk or a swim, or, you know, whatever it is that you're doing, whatever washing dishes, brushing teeth, taking care of kids, taking care of elderly people in your family, all these activities of everyday life, as we do them together, and on our own, with each breath, with each moment that we're mindful, we're actually with each, and also with each time we sit through any kind of discomfort, the discomfort of painful or difficult, challenging emotions, or discomfort of pain in the body. Each time we do that, we're strengthening our resilience and our adversity quotient. I'm going to tell you the qualities that that were named. Hold on, something just popped up in my screen that I didn't invite, that I don't want. Go away, please. Thank you. The qualities, and these are the qualities that we cultivate that allow us to still blossom, to still sense the aliveness and presence that is our birthright, even in the face of suffering and difficult challenges or significant adversity. So people with a high adversity quotient, and that means the ability to respond wisely instead of just getting all reactive, throwing up our hands, feeling helpless or despairing. That would be moments when we're having low adversity quotient. But just being able to meet the challenges in our lives with a little bit of wisdom, and maybe even a little bit of creativity, and maybe even understanding that they will strengthen us, strengthen our hearts. These are the qualities, and they actually correspond to the paramitas, some of the spiritual strengths that are named. There's 6 in the Mahayana tradition, 10 in the Theravada, but there's 6 of these: perseverance, flexibility, endurance, perspective, self-efficacy, self-soothing. And they correspond. Perseverance is like that strength of practice, the effort, the enthusiasm, the willingness to come back over and over again to this moment, to this breath, to this metta phrase, to this guided meditation, to this whatever formal practice we're doing. We're building that. We're expressing, it's an expression of the perseverance, but it's also building and strengthening that perseverance. And then flexibility. And that's the wisdom to be able to entertain multiple perspectives and to see the other side of a situation. For me to see how it might land on Carla or Rick or Ava, to be able to take other perspectives, the wisdom of not being so hardcore separate, identified with this self and this identity, which is important, but also can be a kind of, it can isolate us. We can feel very alone in this thought world, encapsulated in there. So having the flexibility to take different perspectives and see things from different angles. And then there's endurance, which is concentration, which is the ability to stay with something. We call it samadhi, the ability to gather our energies and sit or stand or walk or lie down with some awareness. And sometimes it feels like the awareness is separate from the subject of awareness, like my awareness is separate from my view of you and the tiles on the screen. But the more we practice, the more it becomes one thing. Inside and outside become one. There's not so much extra going on inside. And so it's just what's here, like a mirror reflecting. And that also brings perspective, which in this case would be our equanimity, right? The spaciousness of mind and heart, that we have this, the understanding that, yeah, all things pass and it's not personal and I don't have to take it personally. And then self-efficacy, I think, is our sila, our virtue, our integrity, the goodness of mind and heart. And the self-soothing is very much what we did this morning. And I think right now I've been listening to podcasts on the website for the Center for Humane Technology, my friend Tristan Harris's website. And he's using the word meta crisis, that all of these things that are kind of overlapping and interlocking challenges in our world today, climate change and pandemic and misinformation and polarization. And I mean, I'm not going to list them all. It's really hard actually to face and list them all. But that the combination of all of these things that we're facing is very destabilizing. Things that we counted on and took for granted, like a certain kind of weather at a certain time of year. Just simple things that we've been able to count on, that what we read in the news is true, or maybe at least a partial truth. We know it's not entirely true ever, but a partial truth, right? So many things that we have thought we could just take for granted, like the things you can take for granted in a good, healthy relationship. And I'm not talking about just taking each other for granted and not appreciating each other. I mean, being able to count on or to depend on a certain stability of things. And now a lot of those things are not there, not in the way that they used to be. And so where do we go for refuge? We go into our hearts, into our compassion, into our trust that life can bloom even in the midst of these challenges and the suffering that they might bring to us, and that we can continue to create these moments of metta, loving kindness, of karuna, compassion, of mudita, joy, and joy in the happiness of others. When we're not happy, when nothing's good in your life, it's one of those days or one of those times, you can always look around and enjoy the happiness of others who are, they're not at that point in the wash cycle. They're at a different point. And a quote that I used in the yesterday is from the poet Rilke, who says, "Somebody who is ready for everything, who doesn't exclude any experience, even the most incomprehensible, will sound the depths of their own being." And I feel like this is actually a teaching for us. It's like a practice instruction. That willingness to embrace all of experience, whatever's happening, to not sweep some things under the rug, to not set other things aside. Oh no. But this is what we practice for, to be ready for everything, to be ready for the times when life, challenges us so much, that we could be ready, that we understand that we may not like what's happening. We may be in agony over what's happening. It may be anguishing, but we actually know that it is workable. It's not going to overwhelm, destroy. It's not going to flood or destroy us. Crossing the flood is one of the metaphors that the Buddha used, and we talk about here. How do you cross the flood? We're not trying to banish suffering from our life as much as we might want to do that. We're just developing a different relationship to it. It's like the relationship between the citta, the aware, the awake, the mindful mind, and that which is in front of us. We're learning to be able to sort of disengage with awareness, loving awareness, hopefully, at least a little bit of tenderness, kindness in it, from the contents of our experience, not to see them as separate, but to be able to be aware of them, to observe them, to not be 100% caught inside of them. And this is how mindfulness helps us overcome that hardcore sense of separateness that is behind really all the ills of the world that I just mentioned, right? All the global threats, the violent racism, the things that we've become very much more aware of during the last year and a half. And so one of the ways of finding, of appreciating how life blooms in the face of suffering was taught to me early on by one of my Zen teachers, the Japanese Soto Zen monk, Koben Chino Otagawa. And I told the story yesterday, and I wrote about it too. It was a really profound moment for me that I want to share with you, where one of my family members had been hospitalized. They were in and out of hospitals a lot until they got the medication they needed to allow them to have some stability in their life. So they were living in a halfway house at that time, and it was a pretty kind of rundown place. And Coben was visiting in Cambridge, and he did stay with me, which was an honor. And like, really, all of my old time Zen teachers took an interest in our personal lives, and there weren't so many of us in those days that they couldn't say, accept a dinner invitation, come over to your house, or it was very different then. And so Coben was willing to come with me. He wanted to visit my family member who was hurting in the halfway house. And we got there and we went up to their room, and it was, I mean, it was so messy. It was also, that was another lesson for me, like, of being completely unapologetic about who you are and how you live, that you don't feel like you have to clean up because somebody's coming over, even somebody important. And this family member definitely respected a lot this Zen teacher. So, but they didn't feel the need to pick up or clean up. And so we walked in, and it was just the way it was, the ashtray overflowing with cigarette butts. And Coben took it all in. He looked around. It wasn't a big room, and looked at my family member and talked. And then at the end of the visit, before we left, he reached into, he had these black priest robes they have very long sleeves, and the sleeves are like big pockets so you can put stuff in. And so he reached into that big pocket of his robe, and he took out some rice paper and a paintbrush and a inkstone, and got a little water and rubbed the inkstone with a brush and made some black ink, and then spread out the piece of rice paper and made this beautiful calligraphy for my family member, which they don't have anymore, and they wish they did. But anyway, he made this beautiful calligraphy, and then he translated it: life blooms in the midst of suffering. And just experiencing the joy of being with my teacher, who I loved dearly, being with my family member who I loved, but who was trouble in those days, and experiencing that teaching of, yes, here we are, we're alive. Everything is very vivid and real. We're awake to it all, right in the midst of the painfulness of this situation. It was something that obviously I never forgot, and that I wanted to share with you. It felt like such a profound expression of love. We could say love blooms in the midst of suffering sometimes too, but adversity doesn't always bring. It can be very traumatic, and it doesn't always bring strength or resilience or healing. But with this practice and with time, it can. And that's the promise. I don't like to make claims for this practice because it can be, it can be a pretty winding road, or, as I was saying in the guided meditation, kind of a roller coaster. But no matter what our capacity is at any given time to hold an experience with awareness and love, we can also get inspired by the teachings of the Buddha, by songs, by art. I mentioned yesterday the Church of Beyonce, or of Lady Gaga singing about her healing, or countless other songs and examples of beautiful art. And this too is life blooming or the humor, the people who can find a sense of humor and absurdity in it all, and draw us into that perspective, which can also be so helpful, to be able to laugh. And and that's what I think helps us keep going and develop perseverance. And if you ask people who've been in really traumatic situations, like soldiers on the battlefield, or anybody facing some huge obstacle or huge task, that they're just doing it, and you ask them what keeps you going or what kept you going in that situation, and the answer will always be the love of somebody. I remember that amazing story. I actually gave a Dharma talk about it years ago. I forget what it was called, the book about it, but there was a soccer team whose plane went down in the Alps, and not the Alps, excuse me, the Andes. They were from Uruguay, I think. And their plane went down in the Andes, and they were in the middle of the snowy mountains, and it crashed, but some of them survived. And a couple of them were able to walk out through the mountains. It was an incredible story. And what helped the leader survive? It was called Alive. Yeah, thank you, Robert. The book was called Alive. And when he was asked, like, what kept you going through this gruesome experience, and he said, the love of my father. His sister had died in the crash, and I think maybe the mom too. I can't remember all that, but he said, my father, the love of my father, the longing to see him again, the longing for him to be able to see me again. It's or the love of the, your sisters and brothers soldiers on the battlefield, or your, just the deep and sustaining connections that you might have in this life. So that too, community, being with each other, doing this practice together, this is also really, really, really sustaining. So let's see what else I might want to share with you before we have our time for conversation. Oh yeah, and I just wanted to say too, the Buddha was really kind of a wonderful artist too, in his own right. If you do ever read the suttas, the original teachings, they were compiled hundreds of years after the life of the Buddha, but they're the closest thing that we have, because it was an oral tradition. And so things were passed on, and the teachings always begin with, thus I have heard, because, it was, the practice was to listen and to take them in, to listen deeply. But if you go back and you read some of those sutras, you'll see that they're full of imagery of the beauty of life, and beautiful portrayals of the human predicament, our predicaments. But they're full of cows and oxen and jackals and plants and dung heaps and donkeys and cows and elephants. Yeah, all these elements of rural life that he wove into actually very poetic teachings, and always relational, always in the form of an exchange. Somebody comes and asks a question, and there's a response. And I love that part too. It's in the context of our relationships with each other, of community, of sangha, was the word that they used. And so we can just, I think part of how we can be creative in meeting suffering is by looking around us and seeing what inspires us, which songs, which art, which stories inspire us, and also to appreciate these simple moments of presence, of mindful awareness that we are doing all day long. Every time you remember to be present, every time you remember to offer some love or caring to somebody who needs it, or to anybody. These are, we don't often notice these kinds of moments and appreciate them. The Buddha was very clear. He said, you must contemplate your sila, you must contemplate your goodness. And I repeat this teaching over the years pretty often, because it's one that we forget in our moments of unworthiness, or our habit of ignoring ourselves, or not finding ourselves that worthy or interesting of our closest and most intimate kind attention. He said, contemplate your sila. Don't just look at all the mountains you still have to climb. Take time to stop and appreciate, and maybe look back at all the mountains that you have climbed already. This is also a practice of loving kindness and of compassion that strengthens our courage and our perseverance and all the other adversity quotient, all the other qualities that we're building into our hearts so that we can be ready for everything. And that readiness for whatever appears in our life, or in our dying and our death, that readiness does it sounds, it asks us to sound the depths, to find the depths of our own being. So this is what I wanted to share with you today, or some of it. And now I'd like to take a moment to maybe just take this in, and then if you'd like to have some exchange, some conversation together, you can raise your hand. You can click on the reaction button down toward the right on your screen. There's a raise hand icon. I mean, you can also wildly raise your hand. This group is pretty small this morning, so there's a chance that Caroline will see you. Caroline, you're moderating today, right? Are you
Yes,
here?
I am. I'm here.
Okay, good.
Good
Okay,
to see
great.
you.
Hi, nice to see you too. Yeah, so Caroline will call on you, and I'm so glad, Meredith, you raised your hand at the beginning.
Yes, Meredith,
Instead of at the end. Yeah.
If you want to go ahead and share, thanks again for raising your hand in the beginning.
And for those of you who may be new, that's just kind of an in-joke, because Meredith has had a tendency to wait until everybody else talks, to be very generous that way. But then there's only 1 minute left for her.
It's not really, well, I haven't thought of it as generosity, more as.
Well, see, that's what I mean. We have to start appreciating the things that we don't think of about ourselves, right?
Yes, that's right. And I want to back up just a hair and say, I've never felt critical of you for being impatient. When you've wondered, what was going on when you weren't teaching, I jumped in and tried to reassure you that in my mind, we still care about you, and then I thought, well, I can't speak for everyone, and blah, blah, blah. But
yeah, some of them might hate her.
No, that's not what I mean.
No, I'm teasing. They wouldn't be here.
But you said something right away, and I'm still a people pleaser. And I said, yes, that's it. And that's not what I meant at all. It wasn't anything about impatience. It was about, please don't worry. We're here. We're the same. I don't know. I miss you when you're not here. I'm happy to see you when you're back. We're fine. Please come and go as you need and want. That's all I really wanted to say to you.
Wow, that is very beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm taking that in. That is a very loving thing to say, and I appreciate it very much.
And yeah. I'm 75 today. And
oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. I know, it's like, who's this old?
I'm older.
Yeah, nah, 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 nah.
Exactly.
Contemplating my goodness today sounds like the pleasure of my life. For to to do today.
Yes,
What's
yes.
wrong? What needs to be done? Oh my God, the laundry. You know. So thank you for that. And thank you for your teachings.
And thank you and happy birthday to you. And I'm going to be thinking of you today, just reveling in your own goodness,
And likewise, mutual.
basking in it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Gary. I see you have your hand up. Feel free to share.
Hey, Trudy. Thank you so much. Happy anniversary.
Oh, nice to see you. Hi.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Well, I've actually been here, but I usually hide my face.
Okay.
But a couple just thank yous and then a question. Several weeks ago, you mentioned that you got a new boogie board. And that led me to get my boogie board out and get back in the ocean. I haven't done it forever. And it was exhilarating. And so thank you for sharing that hobby of yours. It was just,
Oh, I'm so glad you did it. It's so
it was
joyful.
so much fun.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. Second, another thing is I got engaged recently. And you may remember several years ago when I kind of came back into Insight, I was the opposite of that spectrum. And just as I prepared to propose and just kind of thinking about the life that my fiance and I are going to build, I often reflected on the love that you and Jack share with us. And without you knowing, you guys have really been or become love role models for me. Just watching how Jack, talks about you as his beloved, and just watching the two of you without any formal teachings, just how you guys are together has really been such a gift for me. So
you.
just wanted to thank you for that.
Yeah.
And as you also know, I've, ever since my kiddo is very young and she's 5 years old now, I've tried to be doing mindfulness stuff with her, right? Like our bedtime routine is doing metta together. And I was just wondering that, given your years of experience of working with kiddos, she's 5.5 now.
Yeah, she's getting big.
What are the paths that a parent might play as, in terms of teaching or modeling for one's child in this tradition?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And five is a great age because their minds, they're really smart and observant and much bigger in that way, but they're still little too. And I really love that age. And I think we can learn from them actually a lot about presence, because it's one of the reasons I have enjoyed spending so much of my professional life in the past with children, is that their experience of life is not mediated by thought like ours. It's just very clear and vivid and present. Of course, it's also not, they also don't have the capacity to reflect on their experience, to be aware of, and all of that. But that quality of presence that they have is something to nurture and to help her stay connected to. And the best way with children is really through play, because that's how they learn. And that's what they're wired to love to do. I would give a shout out to my friend Susan Kaiser Greenland, her book Mindful Games, which is lots of fun activities that cultivate the qualities of mindfulness and metta, geared toward children, young children.
Cool.
So I would recommend that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And congratulations. And look at the chat. You're getting congratulations from people.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and it's also beautiful for everyone to witness your journey that you've shared a little bit of this, this morning too, that, or this afternoon, wherever you are, but that really you came, you were very heartbroken. You had this really tough situation, and it looked very hopeless for a while, as things do when we're heartbroken.
Mhm.
And then, lo and behold, it's not that long later, I had to wait 10 years in between my marriages, but it was a few years and here you are. And so I'm just really happy for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I think too, what you said, and this is just for everybody, about Jack and me, and it's true, we certainly don't think of ourselves as role models. You know what I mean? We don't think of ourselves that way. We're just who we are with each other. And we happen to be old enough that we don't get stuck on some of the things that we would get stuck on when we were younger in relationships. And we've had this lifetime of practice to share, which helps too. But, just like we don't appreciate or think of ourselves that way, and you don't think of yourself that way. Oh, I'm a model of healing and resilience. Look what's happened in my life. And when I share this with everybody, it gives the person who's just recently split up or divorced, or, gives them some hope actually for their life. And so this is another element of that I didn't include, and I want to thank you for pointing it out. It's another element in the contemplation of our sila, that there are things that we are for other people that we may not even realize. But the way that we live our lives, bring more love, more healing, mending into our lives, actually helps everybody else too. Yeah. So thank you. I see Laura is saying in the chat that she's recently separated after 25 years. Yeah, it helps. There's life after heartbreak.
Bob, I see you have your hand up. If you're ready to share, please feel free to do so.
Thank you. Hi, Trudy.
Hi, Bob.
Hey, thanks. This is not, I don't think this is really on topic, but last week I was hiking in southern Utah with a friend. It's a question about practice is what it is. And I've known most of my life, I've had a kind of fear of heights, like the edges of things. And I've always thought about it in a kind of psychological perspective. Because my mother, I grew up hearing this story from my mother that when I was 1 year old, that she found me on the edge of a balcony and she freaked out, and I got to hear about that, my whole childhood. This time, yeah, right. This time, it was, so there were lots of trails that had edges like that with, no guardrail, 1,000-foot drop, whatever. Roads like that, almost more terrifying, actually.
Yes.
It was so bad that it freaked me out. I was freaked out that I was that freaked out, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I've read about this, that what my experience was that I didn't know that I wouldn't throw myself into the void. Not because I wanted to die, but because there's something about it like felt compelling. And so I've been reflecting on, maybe there's more than a psychological explanation or source. That maybe I thought, oh, maybe there's a spiritual dimension to this, like my relationship to the void, or something. So it's just been a few days, about a week that I've been. Anyway, I wondered if you had any thoughts about how to use my practice to
Not throw yourself
investigate that or learn something about it. I don't.
Well, it feels like, first of all, you already are doing that just by even contemplating that question or having that question come up in your awareness, in your psyche. The inquiry, what is this, is really important. What is this? Like, I happen to share some of that fear, and especially of those roads in southern Utah, because when Jack and I were there last year, we were driving an RV, and it wasn't a huge RV or anything, but still, I was just convinced that it would capsize. And Jack kept saying they don't capsize, but it was an irrational fear when we would get into those places that you're describing. So I understand the fear and the fear of the fear, actually, too, because I think that's some of what you're talking about. But in terms of the void and that fascination that we have with looking into space and the sort of vertiginous feeling of being drawn toward it, is that where we're coming from and where we're headed? Is that what we feel, that it's the source world in some way embodied in physical space? I don't know, but I really want to encourage you in the inquiry, in looking into it, because that inquiry will lead you somewhere for sure. And it'll be much more fulfilling to sound the depths of your own being than to hear something intellectually. Do you know what I mean? So that's, and it's very alive in you right now.
Yeah.
So that's a good, it's a good thing to inquire into, and not necessarily worry about the clinical label for it or the this or the that, but just the experience, because there is something about, probably everybody has experienced this, when you're looking out over a cliff, or even when there's a guardrail, there's still that feeling of just, we're drawn toward that infinite, seemingly infinite space. I don't know. I can't answer that for you.
Well, it
But
just helps to share it and hear what you're saying next.
Yeah, I think it's really your koan. It's your inquiry right now to look at that, because it's also like deep states of meditation can feel like that, scary, like, and in that sense, you're not, obviously you're not in physical danger of falling or jumping or anything like that, but it's unfamiliar territory. No, it's completely unfamiliar. And just because it's unfamiliar, it can be scary. I remember once my mind popped into this really vast space during a retreat, and I got so scared I wanted to make a phone call. And I remember watching my mind and thinking, what happened? Nothing happened.
Right. Nothing happened. Right.
Exactly.
I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Laura, I want to just take a moment to say I'm really sorry. 25 years is a long time to be in a relationship. And
thank you.
Yeah.
It's fraught with a lot of feelings, but because of my practice and InsightLA and my therapist, my husband, eventually I'll call him my husband. I learned that from you. But for now, he's still my husband. And my 15-and-a-half-year-old, we're surprisingly well. My husband and I decided to be as kind and as mature as possible. We're friends. And last night, my son we dropped him off together for his first homecoming dance, 10th grade. And then we had a bite to eat and waited for him to finish, picked him up, and they went off to their home and I went off to mine, and we're all getting through it. with our feelings, and, there's sadness and there's anger, but nobody is really reacting in a bad way. So it's been 3 months, so I'm hoping that continues. So
That's amazing.
I know,
That's
but I
a
have a
real
good,
tribute to your practice, really,
my
because
practice. Yep. And
the
my
first year is usually the angriest.
yes. Yeah. So no, it's not easy, but we're getting through it, and I am sometimes shocked with the grace that we're struggling to, to continue. So, and we all love each other. There's no hatred or anything there that I've heard about in other, marriages and things. There's not. I mean, I love my husband, he's a good man, but it was time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my son is old enough. Yeah. So
You know,
thank you.
Yeah, I talked about it at the beginning. I talked about nikama, or renunciation, and I called it simplicity, but it's also renouncing. You've been renouncing the anger and the painful, sad parts, the disappointments, all those feelings that inevitably accompany separation and breakups, um, and and that's not easy to do. We need our practice to be able to do that, because the mind wants to kind of chew on the resentments and go over them, and obsessively even, that's just part of what happens with breakups. So yeah, a bow to you and your family for being, again, this is it's another example of what I was talking about with Gary, that you don't think of yourself as being an inspiration to others of how, but I'm sure there are others who are either contemplating a breakup or having had a breakup, and they get to see, oh my gosh, there's other ways to do this. And it doesn't mean that it's easy, but it's not easy to be drenched in anger and you know what I mean? That's not easy either. It's just something we're more used to. So thank you. Yeah. I was just looking at the poem that Ava posted. Sherry, I don't know what you're asking in the chat here. Can you tell it me? Sherry's saying, may we know again the reference to yesterday's event and the name of the other.
Sorry, you said you did a presentation yesterday with, what was the name of that? And you mentioned
Oh,
a person.
I was the only presenter.
Oh, okay. You mentioned somebody's work that you based some of your talk on.
Oh, that, you mean the adversity quotient, that part? I didn't even talk about that yesterday. Yesterday, I talked about Chris Germer and Kristen Neff's work with mindful self-compassion.
Oh.
And Chris Germer wrote a book called The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion. And then Kristen Neff wrote a book geared, I think, more toward women called Fierce Compassion. It just came out, actually. So, but I didn't talk about those today, but I did yesterday. Yeah. And the presenter was, just me. We have a little time left if anybody else wants to share. It doesn't have to be in relation to what I taught. It can be any simple question about your practice that you may have.
Rick?
Trudy, could you talk about, in order to achieve the happiness or that you're discussing, how much do we have to place aside the notion of karma? Can karma be a huge weight to what you're asking us to bask in more?
Well, karma really just, the word karma, we use it to mean fate or destiny, but it really just means action. Karma just means action. And karma vipaka means actions and results. And so, you could say that appreciating life or cultivating healing in the midst of suffering, or, the things that I was talking about, you could say that those are actions. and that the result would be to have an experience of challenges that is different from our patterned experience that we call our karma. But actually, it's just our patterned experience, our habitual tendencies. That would be more in terms of the teachings, it would be more like the formations. So I think, why don't you get more specific? What are you thinking about personally? That might be more
Just
interesting.
I guess the unfortunate attraction to the notion that when something negative comes up, that somehow I contributed to it in this life and a previous one, and not feeling weighted down by that potential despair.
I see. So what if, do you know the Lojong slogan? It's a Tibetan Buddhist practice, but Norman Fisher wrote that beautiful book about compassion, where he wrote about, one of the slogans is drive all blames into one. And it's really about not offloading blame and responsibility, but taking responsibility for, just as you said, for our side of things and what we may have done to contribute to a particular situation in life. But drive all blames into one is what I'm thinking of for you today, which is not just drive all blames into one, this one, Rick or Trudy, but drive all blames into the big mind of more oneness of everything, where you connect with something that is just so much bigger than our small self concerns that can be very preoccupying and very important to us, but they're not the only game in town. They're not the only thing happening. There is something that is also true all the time. Like Suzuki Roshi talked about, life falling out of balance perpetually against a backdrop of perfect balance. And so with meditation, what we're learning is how to have moments where we connect with that sense of upekkha, of everything's okay just as it is, even when it's not okay. There's that story I always tell, and make it really quick, you'll remember, about the Dalai Lama being on the front page of this little newspaper out of Ithaca at that time called Snow Lion. This is like way back in the 70s when he was young, and it showed a picture of his smiling face, and he was saying, maybe I am the last Dalai Lama. It's all right. There's nothing wrong. It's that, drive all blames into that mind, into that perspective. So whatever part you may have had is not a life sentence to forever repeat that, or that you have now this, I don't know, jail term you have to serve. It's not that. It's not that. Whatever happened before, we used to say in Zen practice, even a demon can be purified in Zazen, that whatever happened before is not as important as how you're keeping your mind and your heart right now. So that's what I would say to you for today. And it's perfect because now we have a minute to sit together before we close. So let's do that. So this is the end of our time of study and practice together. This time where we come together to balance the miseries and misfortunes of life with courage and grace. And like Katie's daughter, Grace. And we discover that even when we're threading our way through the most perilous impasses of our journey, that we can come together and offer some tenderness to ourselves and to each other, which always happens in the chat when somebody is hurting or somebody, we celebrate with each other, we commiserate and sympathize with each other. And at the end of the day, we offer the goodness of all of this to all beings everywhere without exception. May we and all beings discover this benevolent heart of caring, of courage, of perseverance, right in the center of this suffering world. So feel free to unmute yourselves to say hi, goodbye. I will see you next week and the week after. Inshallah, God willing, I will be here. And look forward to being together with all of you. And thank you for your practice.
Thank you, Trudy.
Bye.
Thank you
Thank you so much,
Trudy.
Trudy. It was
Thank
great.
you, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good week, everybody. Hi, Grace.
Bye. Bye, Katie.
Bye, everyone.
Oh.
Be well.
Just an announcement for breakout rooms will be coming back here in about 5 minutes. So at 12:37, feel free to stand up, get a snack, use the restroom, and then we'll come back to have further discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.